Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a powerful argument that connects a truly tragic attack in Australia to a broader, pretty urgent warning for the West. The whole idea is that this event isn't some isolated incident, but actually a sign of a much larger ideological threat. So let's get into how this case is made.
Our story starts on what should have been a perfect summer evening in Sydney. You've got families celebrating the first night of Hanukkah right there on the beach, a scene of pure joy and community. But, as this quote suggests, that peace was about to be just violently shattered.
So, the source paints this picture of a scene just filled with music and laughter, a community really coming together. This slide here, well, it marks the exact moment that celebration was tragically turned into a scene of absolute carnage.
As the source details, two gunmen got themselves into position on a bridge overlooking the beach, and from that vantage point, they just started firing into the unsuspecting crowd below, a crowd full of families and kids celebrating a holiday.
And this went on for 10 straight minutes. For 10 relentless minutes, the attack just raged on, turning this place of joy into a scene of pure terror as people were just scrambling for their lives. By the time the shooting finally stopped, dozens were wounded and 15 people, from young children all the way to the elderly, had tragically lost their lives.
But even in the middle of all this horror, the source points to an act of just incredible courage. A fruit vendor named Ahmed al Ahmed, seeing what was happening, actually tackled one of the gunmen and disarmed him. It's an action that very likely saved countless lives.
Okay, so this horrific event is really the launching point for the source's main argument, that this attack isn't just some random act of violence, but a symptom of a much larger ideological threat.
Now, the source is really precise on this point. It argues that the threat isn't the religion of Islam, but a political ideology it calls Islamism, which it defines by its goal of governing all of society through religious law.
And this distinction is really the core of the whole argument. On one hand, you have a personal faith of peaceful worship, exemplified by heroes like that fruit vendor. And on the other, a political ideology that, according to the source, is just fundamentally at odds with open societies.
So, from that ideological framework, the speaker then broadens the scope, arguing that the Sydney attack isn't an isolated incident at all, but part of a much bigger global pattern.
The source then asks this question, to try and put the audience right in the shoes of those affected. It asks us to imagine a reality where having armed guards at schools and synagogues is just a normal thing, a constant reminder of a threat that's always there.
And to build this case, the source starts connecting the dots between all these recent events. You've got foiled plots in Europe, a shooting in Los Angeles, and even warnings that came from the Jewish community in Australia beforehand. The argument is that these aren't separate things, but clear evidence of a rising tide of anti-Semitism across the West.
The main criticism here is really aimed at the official response. The source basically says that by treating these events as unrelated lone wolf incidents, Western leaders are completely failing to confront what it identifies as the underlying ideological cause.
And this brings us to the central metaphor of the entire argument, this powerful image of the canary in the coal mine. The idea is that the well-being of a nation's Jewish community is a direct indicator of the health of the entire society.
Now, this is a really crucial reframing of the whole issue. From this perspective, anti-Semitism is way more than a threat to just one group. It's a warning sign that the very foundations of a free society are starting to crack for absolutely everyone. So, the argument is laid out as this clear progression. When Jewish citizens are targeted, and the state kind of hesitates to respond, the source calls it a symptom of ideological cowardice, a sign that the principles protecting all citizens are already starting to erode.
So this warning, it all culminates in a final really urgent call to action, and not just for Australia, but for all Western nations.
The core message here is that freedom isn't some passive, comfortable feeling. It's a costly, active thing. It demands the moral clarity to actually identify and confront hostile ideologies, even when it's uncomfortable to do so.
And right here, the stakes are presented as generational. The warning is that if we fail to act with clarity right now, we're going to leave the next generation with a much harder, much costlier battle. Not just preserving their freedoms, but having to win them back entirely.
And so the argument wraps up by turning this question back on all of us. It leaves us with a timeless challenge, about personal and collective responsibility when you're faced with what it defines as a fundamental threat to freedom.